Visibility beyond pixels. Impact beyond words. Women's Impact Circle podcast. One empowering story at a time. Hosted by Paulina Palka.
So hello, my guest today is Melanie. Melanie is podcaster herself, and she's got a lot of experience in business. So hello, Melanie. It's absolutely
Hello.
lovely to meet you today.
You too.
Can you tell me a bit more? What is that you're doing?
Yeah, so my name's Melanie Benson, and I'm known as an authority amplifier. And what I do is I help people who have expertise, oftentimes a coach, a service professional, someone who's like creating courses, and they know they have amazing work, but they feel like a best kept secret. And they feel invisible in their marketplace, and everything they're doing hasn't really turned on that steady stream of great clients that they're hoping for. And so I showed them how to amplify and accelerate their authority in their marketplace and become a recognized expert that has a steady stream of business that gets them into 5 and 6 figure months.
Oh, that's brilliant. So we can learn a lot today from you. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation. As you said, that you work with experts to amplify their voices, expertise, being recognized as authority. Is there any specific strategy you used for yourself, to be in place that you are now in business?
Well, to really kind of pave this path properly, I probably should go back to the beginning. When I started my business in 2000, yes, 2000.
Wow.
Yeah, a little bit of the OG there. I was just so flustered with what it was going to take to grow a business, to attract clients. I had no idea how to do marketing. I didn't know how to sell, and I had to learn all of it. I did go and get trained as a coach, so I am a certified and trained coach, but that didn't really teach me how to attract clients. And there became this moment when I was looking at my future thinking, can I do this? Do I have to scrap this and go back and get a job? And I thought, no, I made this decision. I'm going to be all in on this. And that's when I started to realize that people who had steady business, I started to study and train with other mentors, other experts. And I realized they have a clear message that solves a specific problem, and they're highly visible. They are on stages. So back then, right, we didn't have social media. We didn't have live streams. We barely had teleseminars. And I started to get out there as a specialist. I picked an area to focus on, which back then was helping people stop feeling overwhelmed as they're growing their business. And I leveraged relationships and got on stages. And it was almost like there's this, and I really want this to hit home because I think this is a misunderstood part of success. Yes, you can do all the things, but by leading with a specific solution and people getting to know me for a specific solution, it almost like this buzz and momentum kicked off that took over and started getting me booked over and over again on other people's stages. So I had to do the initial work, but then this wildfire effect took off, and it allowed me to grow and, get my reach in a bigger way. So that was really the beginning of it. But, like many people, I didn't want to be on the road all the time. I didn't want to be away from my house. I'm a little bit of a homebody, truth be told. And even though I go to events and I speak at events, I loved the emergence of technology bringing podcasts into our world. And so back in 2009, 2010, I started to see this new technology of podcasting and being able to create audio audio recordings. Back then it was very clunky, but I thought, wow, okay, so I'm starting to see this emergence of people interviewing other people on these virtual stages like this. And I thought, I like this. And so I leaned into it. I did a few interviews. I was invited as a guest to people who were early adopters of the podcasting world. And I thought, I want this to go on turbochargers, right? Like I want to explode the podcasting market. And I was still feeling kind of invisible. Like I had this huge growth. And then I kind of got disenchanted with everything. And I pivoted my brand. And I went through feeling completely invisible again. So I thought, what if I start my own podcast where I have the power of who gets on my stage? I have the power of creating and curating this experience with people. And I am the authority who's the host of the event, which I know, or the podcast, which I know you know the power of. And all of a sudden, things took off again. So there's more to the story, but I want to pause, and I know you probably have things you want to ask me, but I wanted to say it wasn't intentional to do both sides of the microphone in the beginning,
Right.
but I want people who are listening today, as you're listening in, like I want you to know, like being on both sides of the microphone has had a significant growth impact on my business.
Does it take long to grow? Because, for example, I watched the other day video with Alex Hormozy. If I pronounce it wrong, I'm sorry. But most of people know him. He said that I think first 120 or something like this episodes, he was just talking about how to grow or manage like fitness, gym. And he said to just carry on, because most of people just give up. And it takes, he mentioned something like 21, I think, recording something like this to be in top 5. Of course, it has to bring some value, but it takes some numbers to go through, and most people give up. And I would like to ask you how you see it, as from time perspective. Does it take long, or changing, adjusting, everything?
Yeah. Yes. So Amplify Your Success, which is my podcast. See the corner of it there. That's my second podcast. And the first podcast I consider my MBA in learning what to do and what not to do. Or maybe my MVA, right? My master's in video, something or other. But I realized that there was a lot of power in that podcast, but I didn't have passion for what was happening with that podcast. And it was a video podcast before we had all these live streaming tech. So again, kind of on the early adopter side. And it was like slugging rocks up a hill by myself. Like I just felt so uninspired by it. And I had no shortage of guests, but what I had was I didn't have the connections built between my business that I was growing and the podcast theme. And so I scrapped that podcast and I went into a space of kind of doing what I call like the client avatar messaging. It's like the foundations that I teach in my 100K Authority accelerators. Like, who do I really want to attract? What do I really want out of this show? Really getting the foundation strong. And when I went back into birthing my podcast that I have today, Amplify Your Success, I went in with 2 really clear objectives. Objective number 1, I absolutely wanted it to be a top show. I was not creating a show just for like my circle of friends or my community. I wanted a top show that would have traction and position me as an authority, but also like it was so valuable to the community at large, it would grow on its own. So that was objective number 1. And objective number 2 is I wanted it to be able to open doors to clients, to other peers and influencers in my industry.
Brilliant.
And going in with absolute crystal clear objectives, then we developed the strategy. How are we going to pull that off? We had clear tactics. So we're on episode 373 as we're airing this, or as we're recording this, and I have not missed 1 week of production and airing since the day we went live.
Really?
And I think what happens, Paulina, for a lot of people, you ask, like, does it take time? It started to really hit this tipping point at about 150 episodes. And I was attracting clients from it from around episode 20 or 30 because I had like my marketing strategy in place, but it really started to grow and it started to attract speaking engagements for me. It started to put me on the radar of other really big name people. It started to build more influence for me. So it kind of started taking off around that episode because we had a very clear, consistent marketing strategy to not just attract clients, but to execute on that. I want to be a top show. And so about around episode 150, we hit the top 1.5%. Actually, we were in the 0.05% for a while, and then
Wow.
it dropped back down to
That's
1.5%. And we've stayed there ever since. And
mm,
I feel very grateful because that means we have a robust and very loyal fan base. But it also is because my team and I are very intentional. We focus on growing the reach.
the reach, exactly. It's not like it's for some it's hobby, of course. For some it's just,
Mhm.
way to you know kill some time, do something additional, whatever. But if you really want to have something out of it, I think, like you said, you have to be intentional and you have to put strategy. There is one thing I want to ask you, because it's easy for you to say you are an expert, as how many years you spent in Fortune 500
Oh,
companies?
yeah. Well, I was at 15 years between the the 3 companies technically, but yes. But I gotta
Yes,
say, like outside of leadership development, that did not prepare me for entrepreneurship. It was not a linear path at all.
at all. Yeah, I know something about this. But as you work with experts, and you are an expert, how do we recognize? Because it's always, fascinating me how easy for some is to say I am an expert in, email marketing, and how hard is for some to say this word itself, that I'm not an
Mhm.
expert, I don't know, too much. So how would you say you recognize someone as an expert to to then establish their authority?
Yeah, there's a little bit of like stages that I think we go through, and one of them is experience. You've had some experience, and that's probably or you've had training, and that's what's got you to where you are today.
Mm,
And now you're kind of on the ground implementing and integrating. And so you might consider yourself in phase 1, I'm gathering more experience and more traction. And I don't know that people at that stage will feel confident saying I'm an expert in something, but chances are you do have an expertise, and I call it your superpower.
yes.
And each of us have a superpower that when we do it, someone else learns something that they need to learn from us. And it's probably so easy and so like, it's like so automatic for you to do it. You don't
Yeah.
even think how valuable it is. So that's one of the clues when I'm helping people uncover their superpowers. The second phase is what I call the expert phase. And that's where you've been doing the superpower for a while and you're realizing, yeah, this works. This is actually getting some results. Like, okay, people keep coming to me over and over and over again. And you're starting to have this awareness now that I'm probably sitting on a gold mine, but I'm
Yeah.
not fully amplifying the awareness in the world that I can do this for people. And that's one of my specialty areas, is helping people identify what that expertise is and then put a what I call a heck yes offer around it, being able
Yeah.
to create a message that's so resonant with your ideal clients that they can't wait to work with you, right? And so there's putting the elements that allow that expertise to be recognized by others. And then there's a phase 3, and I call that the authority phase. And that's when other people recognize you as authority
Mm,
through your brand, through your messaging, through the stages that you're on, and people start coming to you, right? You're not having to pitch yourself as much, but people come to you and say, hey, I'd love to interview you, or I'd like to be on your show, where actually you want the invitations to go the other way, to be specific. But it's like, you are not having to do all the work to be visible. A lot of the visibility is coming to you. And that's the authority stage, which is oftentimes the outcome of phase 2, and really committing to doing the work to be visible as an authority there.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, finally someone said that. There is a third stage, and absolutely agree with you. And I think also, especially women nowadays, have to hear is like how being like recognized, being an authority in in your niche, in your business, benefit actually business in terms of generating visibility and credibility.
Let me just I don't know if I understood your question, because there was something coming through that I have to say
Yes,
about that. And maybe this is tied together. But what I just had this conversation yesterday with somebody, and I think this is one of the blocks. Like, maybe this is part of what you're asking. People don't own their expertise, and or they don't feel safe being seen as an authority, right? And I was having this conversation with a woman yesterday who really is an authority in her space, but she was admitting to me that she didn't feel like she could kind of put that on an acceleration and allow herself to be seen in bigger ways on new stages. And she was like controlling who could see her.
Oh yeah, that's very
Right?
often.
Yes. And so there was this internal conflict. And I realized there's, typically there's 3 key reasons why we don't have more authority. And they often have to do with our thoughts, our beliefs, our ideas, and conflicts that we kind of internally experience that maybe aren't even conscious to us. And so when I meet someone who's so talented, but I'm like, you're invisible. Why are you not doing the things to get you out more? And why are you not on more stages, on more podcasts? Typically, they're either afraid, they're letting excuses get in the way, like I'm too busy, or I don't have time, or I don't know what I'm supposed to say. And or there's this deep conflict about if I'm more visible, this bad thing might happen that they're probably not even aware of. And I think as women in particular, we really have to have like a way shower, a support system, a guide, maybe we would call it, to help break those invisible barriers and allow ourselves to have the confidence and the courage and the clarity to get more visible. Because you probably have something so important to get out in the world. And if you're a best kept secret, no one can see you and no one can hire you.
See exactly. And I see it very often with my mentoring and coaching is you can have the best product, the best marketing strategy, really you can be an expert, but if you've got limiting beliefs that you can't do something, or you can't actually speak like you said, on big stages, because something holds you back, because there are all this kind of thoughts around being on big stage, like, oh my goodness, no, I can't speak, everything will laugh at me, etc. This is like 99% of women. Men, of course, they've got it as well, don't get me wrong, but this is a lot of internal work. Did you have something similar, or you always felt like, yeah, I will go for it?
Yeah, I'm sorry if you can hear the dogs in the background. I mean, we all do, right? Like, we all have something that's that invisible barrier for us. And I think every new level, every new like strategy we reach for, every new like maybe something that's outside of what I call your known zone, requires us to break free of those things. For me, one of the things that was like a tussle in my mind was I would keep bumping into these fraud syndromes. Like I feel a little bit like a fraud, or I don't have
What's
clarity on
that?
what my thing exactly is. Like, especially in the early days, I I was so like trained, but I didn't have results yet. And I couldn't speak to them. And so I had to like figure out how can I get some results under my belt so that I can have more confidence saying this is what I do in the world. And so I got really creative and I hosted a training and I did it online. It was one of the early online trainings that we could access or that we could set up. And I
Yeah.
recorded that training and turned it into a product. And so that gave me like a sense of credibility because I got great reviews from the training itself.
Oh,
And
great.
I find that people get themselves stuck because they don't know how to prove what they do.
Yeah.
And then because they don't know how to prove what they do or they don't feel like they can lean on their results, they don't take action on it. Like I have a couple people in my 100K Authority Accelerator, and as we've been working on their known, like what they want to be known for, they would say, these are the results I'm getting. And I'm like, why are you not claiming that? They're like, well, I haven't achieved those results. And so, we have to have conversations about, well, do your clients actually care if you've done it, or do they want to know you can do it for people? Remember, people, what do they call it? Like kingmakers, we're never kings.
Yes.
That doesn't mean you have to be like the actual thing, but you have to be good at getting results for people. So
That's true.
oftentimes our thinking and our belief system creates this really limited paradigm of what's possible. And then we get stuck there.
Yes, yes. I do something very similar with, my personal branding coaching, because you can get visible, you can create, online presence. But everything starts with internal work when they feel comfortable, with getting out there, with putting, some speeches, together if they want to pitch to podcast, etc. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
internal work, I would say 90%. Then is if you feel confident, then you can own what you're actually selling, what you're talking about, etc. Are you a guest on podcast often, or you more focused on on having your own podcast and inviting guests there?
Yeah, I do a blend, and I do that very intentionally. First of all, I have a process that I call it my authority trifecta that is one of the best ways that I know to attract really wonderful, ideal clients into my work. And when I'm a guest on someone else's show or on a virtual stage, like a summit or something, and I'm interviewed, oftentimes people do announce or it comes up that I have a podcast. And what I find is people will they'll go get my free gift, my resource, whatever that is,
Oh,
and then they'll start deep diving into my podcast. And that's where we nurture the relationship. That's where they get to experience like, okay, does Melanie really know her stuff? Do they resonate with my vibe or not? Because your podcast is going to repel some people who you're just not their cup of tea. And then that moves once that we've gotten to a certain level of rapport and they feel that connection, they'll almost always book a consultation. So I look at that 3-step as I want to attract the people where there's some resonance, right? So somebody
yeah,
might be listening today going, I'm really resonating with what Melanie is framing as her process, right?
yeah.
And then they're going to go deep dive and connect with my podcast. And then if that rapport is still there and they're really going, I need this, then that sale is easier to make because they pretty much already decided they want to work together. We're just going to work out the details and decide what is the right path for them in working together. So I have a budget of like being on 5 to 6 stages a month. And some of that's in the recording, some of that's in the airing, but that's our intention. And I
Oh,
also do that, Paulina, for a very important reason. The industry's constantly evolving, right? Things are changing all the time. People are trying new things. And because I teach people how to leverage both sides of the microphone as they build their authority, I've got to stay in the game and stay relevant. So I can teach my audience what to look for, what to do, what not to do. Because if I'm not in it right now, my credibility goes down.
Yes, that's that 100%. And I really adore what you're saying, because you know, you show that your work is like hands-on, even by speaking, or analyzing your work, through podcasting. So it's great. Do you think that there is a huge role, of like consistency in maintaining authority and visibility in podcasting space, or is like whatever create I will, throw, or not really? What do you think?
Well, I love that you're bringing up consistency, because I think consistency can be a competitive advantage. And there's a couple ways consistency, I think, can be an asset. And one is keeping your brand, keeping your message, keeping your offers in front of your ideal clients and in front of your market, right? And so if you just disappear for months and then you pop back in and people haven't seen you all the time, like they probably missed you seeing you when they were ready to solve a problem that you have a solution to. The other thing, and I'm sure you know this, and so I'll be curious your take on this, is that people, when they have different messages all the time, they're doing different things, and we're missing kind of what I call that brand consistency. And like I see this happen a lot with people who are multi-passionate. One day they're talking about their cookie making. The other day they're talking about like being a virtual assistant. And then a third day they're mentioning their real estate deal they just put together. And what happens is your audience doesn't really know what you're an expert in, that you're lacking that specificity. And so it erodes your authority and it confuses people. They don't really know what to have you as a guest on. Can I tell a quick story around this to kind of help bring that point home? So there's a woman, she's been around a long time. She's been around like 18 years and she's had a very successful podcast. And we're exploring working together. And she said to me, she said, I have this podcast that's in the top 5% and I interview all these people and nobody ever invites me to their show. And I thought, isn't that interesting? And so I was kind of like exploring it with her. And what I realized is nobody knows what she does. Nobody knows what she's an expert in to bring her into their world. And so if you want to land stages, you want to land maybe like top high profile shows, or you're trying to get on more collaborations going with other people, or you simply want to attract more clients, you need to be known for something.
Yes, that's true.
That opens the door. Even if you have lots of things you could do, you have to kind of have a starting point that people can go, yes, I want that.
Yes. Oh, definitely. I have to admit myself, I'm multi-passionate, and to be honest, I'm better now. But at the beginning, it would be everything, and then you wonder why nobody listen. I want to tell you everything.
Yeah. And I get it. Like there's this part of us that just, oh my God, I know so much, or I have so many interests. Like I want to play with other people who share those interests. And I think there is a place for that. But I think it boils back down to what's important to you right now? Is it that you want to have a space to talk about all the things? Or do you want to have a mechanism that is going to be like a lever that you can adjust and say, I want to attract more clients. I want to get booked for more paid stages. I want to be able to share my work with more people in the world, right? Like what's important to you? And I think that starts to drive our decisions. Yes?
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, that's a very important question, especially with these people who are like, why I don't attract any clients? If that's your goal, like you said, just focus on bringing more clients and create strategy and any plans, because most of people don't have plans. They don't know what they will be doing together tomorrow with their business. And that's a foundation. I truly believe that. Do you have any tips, or what would you suggest, to someone who wants to or should be more strategic about, podcast, maybe even not starting creating podcast, but podcast, guesting, how to be more strategic about this?
Yeah. Well, again, it kind of goes back to what's important to you right now. When I'm working with people who are wanting to build another client attraction stream in their business, one of the first things we look at is like, okay, so what's the bridge between what you offer and what you can talk about? And really kind of reverse engineering, what are topics that will get people intrigued? I call it like, you want to get them intrigued by your, you want interest, like you want them to actually listen to what you're talking about. That means you really need to understand what's relevant in the world of your potential client or your collaboration partners, whatever that is. Then you want them intrigued. So you have to be really good at curating a conversation and to be able to dance with your host and create that desire for somebody who's really resonating with you and could benefit from you to want to be invested in the next step. Here's an interesting fact. Even though there's millions of podcast listeners, the action doesn't always come through. So people listen and they consume content, but they don't always take action. And so your job as the guest, and I think this kind of like relies on the host a little bit too, is to be able to curate a conversation and to cultivate that intrigue factor so that your audience wants to or I should say the right people in the audience want to take a next step with you. And then, last, you got to make it easy. You got to make something easy for them. And I think a lot of people make it a little too hard. They don't have clear links. They don't have easy, they don't have an easy yes invitation. So anyway, I think just getting those details worked out.
I've noticed that some people just throw content, around, and then they wonder, well, nothing is out of it, so I will just, stop doing it.
Yeah.
That's very often, isn't it? And this is important as well, because it's not a rocket science that when you, for example, going on a tour with some of your marketing, let's say you've got a freebie, or you've got course, you've got coaching, and you want to go, on podcasts and talk about some things and then promote your content. And you are very, very good at this. And I've seen it, or heard it, in your podcast. Like, how do you provide balance between valuable content, yes, for your audience, and promoting actually, business?
It's such a great question. And, I interview lots of people, and when they're being highly promotion oriented, it's a turnoff. It's a turnoff to me. And sometimes it'll pull the listeners in, but I'm like, oh God, do I got to air this episode? Right?
Again.
Here's my belief. And I don't know if I do this perfectly, but I think it's always a work in progress for all of us. I think if we are able to share value, intriguing stories that people can see themselves in, and we can connect with our audience as a real human being and bring some vulnerability and transparency into the conversation, that is what people respond to. And I think when we start being promotional, it's like it's because we're leaning on like a marketing strategy instead of being relatable to our audience. And I've always been the person that tries to lean more on the relatability. Whenever I've invested in training and speaker training and all that, and I would get so messed up in my head, Paulina, and people would be like off put because I was being too promotional instead of being what I call like an authentic authority.
Exactly.
My greatest desire is to be as authentic as humanly possible, so people know what the real me is, and they can decide, do they want more of this, or not. Like,
or not. Not exactly.
yeah.
It's just proceed or not. Bye bye. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Proceed or not.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This is how it's supposed to look, especially at the beginning of your business. I know a lot of business owners struggle, like, oh, I shouldn't say no because I really don't want to work with this person, but oh, I really need money. But this is not how it's supposed to look like, because then business become, a pain, and it shouldn't be like this. And the best way, like you said, is just to being authentic, accept
Yeah.
all your personality quirks, whatever you've got, you know, and proceed, like like I said.
Yeah. I struggled
Absolutely.
with that for a long time, just to be completely
Oh,
transparent. My early days, I thought I had to be a certain way because all the marketing professionals I was hiring were like, you've got to curate this.
hmm,
And I think that's why I ended up pivoting from my first brand, even though it was highly successful.
yeah.
It wasn't 100% aligned with me. And I wanted something that was more authentic and more energetically congruent with who I really
Hmm,
am and what felt sustainable to me and what I really want to do. Like, I wanted to do certain things and not do certain things. And
exactly.
I feel like I've built a brand around the most authentic version of me.
Hmm. Yes. Oh, I really, I can sign, that, because for me it's very important that people, of course, you've got your professional version of yourself, and then you've got your private version of yourself. But the whole trick is to manage, show, the real you, even if you have to be, professional. And you have to, I don't want to say it, like, just let, other people see your true personality, because it's not about hiding anything, but just let yourself be, 100% you, and don't be afraid you will lose someone because of this, because that's the whole point of having business that brings fun. But we create content, or we invite people to our podcast because we want people to make impact, and we want to make some impact. How do you measure impact,
Mm.
in your business, in your podcast? How do you see, like, oh, this is actually made something, and it's not about money, it's more about impact, of your podcasting efforts?
Yeah, there's a few, we call them KPIs, key performance indicators. There's a few ways we measure. Um, I mean, just in terms of my brand overall, like my longevity in business, it's very interesting. What I'm seeing right now is there are people enrolling in my programs now that I have known for over 10 years. And so I want to bring that into the measurement, because sometimes what we can measure now isn't the totality of what's possible. And because I keep coming back and I keep showing up in the game and I keep
Mhm.
cultivating relationships and I stay visible, sometimes the right time isn't now, it's down the road.
Yeah.
And so we need to keep plugging back into, okay, so some of my buyers are going to resonate, but they're going to buy from me down the road, and that's okay. But other things we measure are, um, like if I'm a guest on someone's podcast, we
Mm.
measure how many people actually get my free gift, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
measure how many people book a consultation. I measure how many people join my 100K at 30 accelerator or come to one
exactly.
of my events or something. I measure how many people, when they're in my 100K at 30 accelerator, how many people achieve the goal they set when they join the program,
Mm.
which is usually pretty high.
Mm.
And so I'm measuring everything because I want to know what I do is not just an idea, but it is a tangible result that can be produced. And
Sure.
part of that, you're going back to the ideal client, part of that is making sure that somebody's in the right place in their business before I allow them in.
Oh yes, that's,
It
oh
starts in the marketing and the
yes,
sales, and
exactly.
then
And
it shows up in the results.
in the show. Yes, very, very good. Thank you. Thank you for this. And is there any advice that would you give to aspiring, podcast hosts or guest experts looking
Mhm.
to leverage their authority for business success?
Mm. Well, let's talk about the host side for a second. If you're creating a show to help you grow your business and to attract clients, build your authority, I think you have to go in deciding that your podcast is going to have its own marketing plan.
Yes.
It is not a build it and they will come.
Mm.
You build it, you promote it, and then you promote it and you promote it and you promote it and you get creative and you go guest on other people's shows, and you need to build an audience, not just for yourself, but for the guests you're inviting in, because as
Yeah.
the host, part of your responsibility is to cultivate an audience for your guests, and that's going to get you higher profile guests. And then as a guest, I would say every show is not your show. Don't get caught up in the frenzy of like, I got to be seen everywhere. You don't. You need to be seen where your ideal clients are. And that means you really need to know who your audience is, and then do your due diligence to make sure you're saying yes to shows that get you in front of your audience. I hear people complain, Paulina, and maybe you've heard this too, that, hey, I've been doing this podcast guesting thing and I'm not getting any leads. And when I audit that, it's because they either don't have the right topic. They're making one of, like, I call these 17 mistakes. They've got one of 17 mistakes they're making that's keeping them in the wrong audiences with the wrong message, and they're not set up for success. So be on the right stages with the right topic.
Yes, with the right topic, just be strategic about it. It's in a business, isn't it? You have to be strategic with everything what you do, and intentional, like you
Yeah.
said. I watched your master class. I've got your freebies. Yes, I've got it. I really, I'm amazed by your work. Is there any resource, from all what you have on your website or social media, that would like to share with with women that, for example, she will just start this journey on podcasting, that will help her, because I mainly speak to to women.
Sure.
I will, of course, I will post it in in description below. But is there any specific resource that you recommend from all of yours?
From our conversation today, I feel like what might really be valuable is to recognize what works and what doesn't work when you're going to be a podcast guest, because everybody should be a guest expert. Everyone can do this now. This is a really easy place for everyone to start once you get your stuff fine-tuned. And if you go to melaniebenson.com/scorecard,
Okay.
what I have there is this free scorecard of the 17 most common mistakes that guest experts are making that actually cost them the lead and the client. And I unpack all 17 of these issues so you can recognize, okay, I'm doing this and it's not serving me. And if I did this differently, I would actually be able to turn this into a lead source, or I could actually start to build my authority and get more traction. So I say start there. That'll give you a really beautiful asset. You can download, you can keep it handy, you can review it over and over again and see where you're at. And it'll lead you to some other training and some supportive resources if that feels aligned for you.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you. I will post it, with all links that people can, connect with you. So will be in description below. And I want to say a massive thank you for you. It was absolutely fantastic to, to have you today, and to have possibility to chat about all podcasting, and business journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate your invitation, Paulina.
Thank you. Take care and see you somewhere online. Bye.